Hello, and thanks for joining me on another episode of the Tech Exec podcast. I'm your host, Aviv Ben-Yosef, and today we're going to be talking about how you should be investing your time regularly. Right off the bat, let me say that if I'm sounding a bit pissed, and for all of you who already asked me why didn't the episode come out on Tuesday as usual, that's because GarageBand decided to lose my whole episode, and now I'm having to record it again. Sorry about that. Let's get into business. This episode is connecting with a previous episode where I discussed how you should be doing a reset or a refresh of your calendar to make more time for your important stuff. And after that episode, which if you haven't listened to, you can, the link would be in the show notes. Many people asked me, all right, Aviv, I can make more time, but what should I be doing with the time? I can stop going to those meetings. I can make sure those are defragged so I have more thinking time. But how should my calendar look like? What is the right allocation of time? Because of that, I'm doing this very quick episode where I'm going to tell you what I usually see in healthy companies, what's the thinking behind that, and it should give you some sort of a yardstick to start measuring where you want to be investing your time and whether you're doing that correctly. Let's start with assuming that you only have about 35 hours a week of work. Why? Because I'm saying, let's say you have about 8 hours a day, about 1 hour for lunch. I know many of my clients end up having the lunches be work time as well because they do one-on-ones on lunches. And if you do that, all right, enjoy, but I'm not gonna account for that. I'm assuming we have about 35 hours of actual work, about 7 hours a day, and we wanna leave you with ample buffer space because we all know that things are gonna pop up and you need to be able to respond. You cannot have your whole calendar stacked with things because that means you are never available. No one can ever use your open door policy or whatever because you're always in meetings. You never have the time to think about stuff. So let's assume you have those 35 hours, and I want to try and make sure that you do not allocate more than about a 30 at most. You should have buffer time. And buffer time is not time for yourself. That's a different matter. We're going to get to that real soon, so listen up. First and foremost, we need to make sure that you have your one-on-ones scheduled and on the calendar. One-on-ones, as I have repeatedly said, pretty much every episode, are the cornerstone of the feedback mechanism you're going to have in your organization. And it starts with you as the leader, it trickles down through all of the managers, and you need to make sure that you have these going on. Assuming you have about 5 direct reports, you should be investing about 3 hours a week into one-on-ones. If that doesn't sound to you like enough time, that usually means that when you think about a one-on-one, you are actually putting inside that one-on-one also some sort of a work sync. That's not what I call a one-on-one. I advise for one-on-ones to be a specific meeting simply about the person you are meeting with, and not a work sync. It's not a work meeting per se. It's something about that person. One-on-ones are only for feedback and helping the employee think about where they want to be and improve and grow. We'll talk about that on a different episode, but let's start with saying one-on-ones should not have the work sync in them. So those are your one-on-ones, about 3 hours a week with your direct reports. Add to that an hour or two of one-on-ones with skips. That's one-on-ones with people who are not your direct reports. You should have this big rotation where you try and see everyone in your organization for about 30 minutes every once in a while. If you don't already do this, stop playing the episode, go to your calendar, start sending the next invites for the next couple of weeks, and see the magic that happens, because you get so much out of it when you become directly involved with everyone in your company. Really, this is like one of my magic tricks, and you should be doing that already. So about 3 hours of one-on-ones with direct reports, an hour or two of one-on-ones with skips, and next, the most important thing later after that is thinking time. What is that? It's just time that you have in your calendar that blocks other meetings that you take seriously. You do not use that in order to, scroll through Facebook. That's time that you think about what's been going on, what you're going to do. And sometimes, for example, if you're one of the co-founders of a company, some of the thinking time would be thinking time for all of you together. You will be sitting with the CEO or the chief product officer or whatever, and you will be thinking about the company. But even if not, and you're a VP of engineering, you should be having this time for yourself to think about how your organization is doing, what are the trends that you're seeing, and how you're going to be moving forward and improving on things. How much should you have on your calendar? I recommend starting with about 5 hours a week. For most people, these 5 hours should be spread across about a couple of sessions. I know only a handful of people who actually do this as one half a day a week or so. That's tougher. I admit it's sort of like meditation because you're gonna be sitting without doing anything and yet doing stuff. So that's thinking time. Next on the priority order is usually hiring. Every company is growing, and even if you're not actively growing, I'm sure that you're not hiring, meaning that you are always on the lookout, always involved with people, and so on. Because of that, you should be accounting for about 3 hours a week invested into the interviewing and hiring process. That might be you actually interviewing people. It might be you hearing about the results of the hiring process and making the final decisions. But we all know that you will be involved in hiring, and so you should have about 3 hours a week accounted for this. If you end up interviewing way more than 3 hours, it's either that you're in a very small company and you don't have anyone else to be interviewing, and if that's the case, then that's the case. But in bigger companies, once you have at least 15 employees, 20 employees, you usually should not be interviewing too much because you should be relying on your people to do most of the filtering. And when people come to you, you usually should not be having a reject percentage of over, 30%. The vast majority of people you interview once your team is big enough should be people that have gone through a few interviews already and are likely to be okay. If you want to hear more about this, send me an email and maybe I'll schedule a hiring episode. Moving on, if you recall, I said that we don't have work syncs in one-on-ones. And because of that, you should have about 8 hours a week invested into work syncs. 8 hours, by the way, I think is quite a bit. But this is a habit I've been having such a hard time making people to stop with because people are used to manage by being involved in all these things. And you should be aiming to have your people do things on their own. But given that you're going to be involved in a few anyway, you should have the time for that. Make sure that 8 hours is the cap. It should not regularly be more than that. This is really quite enough. And if it's not, it means that you either are not delegating enough and letting your people do the things and simply update you if you need to be updated, or it means that you're having the worst meeting culture possible because meetings are not effective, people are coming to the meeting, you wait 10 minutes for everyone to arrive to the room, no one actually knows what you're gonna talk about, no one has a ready agenda. Stop 8 hours into syncs, that's enough. And now we get to our last point, and that's shaping. This is a name I'm getting from Basecamp, the company that used to be called 37 Signals, and they call the process of thinking about the next things on the roadmap shaping. And I love that because I believe that any leader should be involved in one way or another with the roadmaps of the organization. Sometimes you're going to be involved more hands-on, working with product to decide exactly what needs to be done. Sometimes it's more high level, like working on the quarterly roadmaps. Whatever it is, you should be ready to have the time for that on the calendar. How much? About 6 to 7 hours, but this usually comes and goes depending on the time of the year. To sum all of this up, we now have allocated about 30 hours of your week, a bit less. You have 20% of buffer time that you can use whenever stuff will happen. And we know stuff will happen. You'll be sick, you'll go on vacation, you'll go to a conference, there'll be a big outage that requires about 10 postmortems. Things are going to happen, and you should have this free time on your calendar. Try not to have your full week allocated ahead of time. Your recurring stuff should not take up more than about 70% of your time, and then you have the buffer space for everything else. I'm guessing you're not listening with a pen and paper, so I will have this breakdown on the show notes as well for you all. And if you have any questions or remarks, please do keep on sending your emails. I love getting them. And that brings me to a new thing I want to start doing, and that's question of the week. I'm getting all the questions from you all, and I'm trying to answer everyone, but I just thought about something that I think will be nice, and that's maybe I'll ask you all a question. Please reply. Take the time to just type up an email on your phone right now and write 5 words, and if I'm hearing back anything interesting, I will share it with all of you, because I may do this for a living, but I keep seeing interesting things in every company, and I think we might find some really nice nuggets from you all. So the question this week is, having thought about how you invest your time, what's the one thing that you've been doing in your calendar and you're finding to have a really good impact on your organization or your just day-to-day? It could be 2 words, like, I don't know, you start meditating, or you have dedicated Facebook time at the beginning of the day to make sure you don't do it too much and stuff like that. Please do share. Send me an email. Thanks again for joining me, and until next time, talk to you soon.